The sun hung low, painting the Wyoming plains in hues of amber and rust. Samuel Carter rode steady. Iskilwisern, Akinershorwern, his horse, an old mare named Bess, plodding along with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Slow, deliberate, worn. There was a time Samuel rode with purpose, his broad shoulders squared, his gray eyes sharp with ambition. Those days were gone, eroded like the dry creek beds he passed. At 42, he was a man unmoored, no badge, no bounty, no wife. His hands, calloused from years of toil, gripped the reins loosely, and his face, lined with grief, carried the weight of a loss that had long since stopped bleeding. Bess coughed, a dry rattle, and Samuel patted her neck, feeling the familiar pang of loyalty to a creature as tired as he was. He wasn't running from anything, nor was he chasing. He simply moved, a solitary figure against the endless stretch of sagebrush and sky. The air was crisp, tinged with the faint bitterness of autumn. When Bess stopped abruptly, her ears twitching, nostrils flaring, Samuel didn't need to tug the reins. He felt it too, a stillness that wasn't right, like the world holding its breath. He dismounted, boots crunching on gravel, and caught the scent, smoke, acrid and wrong. His heart quickened, not with fear but with a heavy certainty. Something had broken here. He moved forward, brushing past tall grass, and then he saw it, a wagon, or what was left of it, wheels splintered, canvas torn like a shroud flapping in the wind. Bodies lay scattered, their forms obscured by shadow, but the violence was unmistakable. Many were Emma women, maybe children, cut down without mercy. Samuel's chest tightened, not with shock, he'd seen death before, but with a dull, aching sorrow. He didn't count the dead. He didn't need to. The silence screamed of raiders, or worse, Nusur Ayurna, men who killed not for gain, but for the hollow thrill of it. His eyes scanned the wreckage, catching on a small hand clutching a bonnet. Another body slumped into the ashes of a campfire. The stench of blood and gunpowder clung to the air, heavy as regret. He stepped carefully, his boots soft against the earth, respecting the dead who no longer cared. Then he heard it, a sound so faint it might have been the wind. But it wasn't. A breath, fragile, clinging to life. Behind a scorched wagon wheel, he found her, curled beneath a tattered cloak, her face streaked with ash and blood. She was no girl, though she looked small in her pain, a woman, perhaps 30, with hair like storm clouds and a dress that spoke of wealth now ruined. Her gloved hand twitched, pearl buttons glinting faintly, while her bare hand was swollen, knuckles scraped raw. Samuel knelt, his breath catching at the sight of her frailty. He hovered a hand near her face, feeling the whisper of warmth, and his heart stirred with something he hadn't felt in years. Turned to a purpose without a word. He slipped his arms beneath her, startled by how light she was, as if grief had already carved away most of her. Her head lolled against his chest, and for a moment, he thought her eyes might open, but they didn't. Bess snorted at the scent of blood but didn't protest as Samuel mounted, cradling the woman in his arms. The horizon burned red as he rode toward his cabin, 5 miles west, nestled against a low hill under cottonwoods. He'd built it 4 years ago, after the fever took Clara, Hinusatsun, his wife. Back then, every nail he drove felt like defiance. Now it was just a place to wait. Inside, the fire glowed low, casting flickering shadows. Samuel laid her on the cot, his hands steady but his heart unsteady, a quiet fear that she might slip away before he could help. Her breath was shallow but persistent, a fighter's breath. He fetched water, cleaned her wounds with a cloth, and wrapped her bruised fingers in linen soaked with oil. The blood at her lip was crusted, and he wiped it gently, his jaw tight with a mix of tenderness and anger at whoever had done this. Night fell, thick and solemn, crickets humming outside. Samuel sat by her, back against the wall, his long legs stretched out, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Sleep didn't come. He didn't trust it to. Morning crept in, draped in mist. She stirred, eyelids fluttering, then snapping open with a gasp, as if waking into a nightmare. Her eyes, a deep hazel flecked with gold, darted wildly, confusion and fear warring within them. Samuel leaned forward, his voice low, weathered like old leather. Don't try. You're safe. She blinked, trying to focus, her gaze sweeping the room. The wood stove, the single chair, Clara's faded portrait on the wall, his rifle prop nearby. Her hands trembled as she clutched the blanket, her breathing uneven, like someone bracing for a blow that never came. She nodded once. A small surrender, and he handed her a tin cup of water. She drank greedily, hands shaking, as if afraid it might vanish. Samuel watched Tenuan, Tormenimon, his chest tight with a strange mix of relief and caution. He didn't know her, but he knew pain. Got a name? He asked after a silence that felt like hours. She looked at her gloved hand, hesitating, her jaw tightening with a lie she didn't want to tell. I don't remember, she said softly. Samuel felt the untruth, but he didn't push. Everyone had their secrets. We'll wait till you do, he said, his tone even, and returned to the stove, giving her space. Gasisoin, for 2 days. She spoke little, slept much, was and ate sparingly, broth, mostly taken in small sips. Her hands stayed clasped, even in sleep, as if guarding something she couldn't name. Once or was, so, she wept silently, tears streaking her face as she stared at the ceiling. And Samuel's heart ached to ask why, but he didn't. He chopped wood, fed Bess, checked on her quietly. She began to notice him, his slow, deliberate movements, the way he carried himself. Not cold but quiet, like a man who'd learned the world heard best when spoken to softly. By the third morning, she was strong enough to walk to the door, wrapped in his old coat, staring out at the prairie. The wind teased her hair, and she stood still, her face a mix of awe and longing. I needed to see sky, she whispered, to know the world still turns. Samuel wata. Standing behind her, felt his throat tighten. It does, Sorian, he said, whether we ask it to or not. Hager Summer. Her eyes, when they met his, were like stormlight, bright, broken. Nobly why would once. I shouldn't be alive, she said, her voice barely audible. Maybe, he replied, but you are. She turned back to the hills, her expression unreadable. I don't know who I am now. Samuel stepped beside her, watching the grass sway. Don't rush it. Let it come when it's ready. They stood there, one, side by side, saying nothing. But a thread of trust wove between them, fragile as spider silk. Days folded into routine. Samuel rose early, tending the barn, while she watched from the window, coffee in hand, her gaze softening with each sunrise. She began to knead dough, her hands unsteady but determined, flour streaking her wrists like a quiet prayer. One afternoon, Terrasini, Suri, Pantini, the smell of bread filled the cabin, imperfect but warm, and Samuel paused at the door, eyes closed, breathing it in. Something in him trembled, a memory of home, of Clara, now joined by this new presence. She handed him a slice on her movements shy but proud, and he ate slowly, the crust cracking under his teeth, tasting like belonging. It's good, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She looked at her hands, a faint smile breaking through. I wasn't sure I'd remember how. A piano came later, an old upright from the general store, bought on impulse when Samuel saw her fingers trace the air like they missed keys. She didn't play at first, just dusted it, her touch reverent. One night, he returned to hear soft notes drifting through the door, hesitant but alive. He leaned against the wall, letting the melody wash over him, his heart swelling with something he couldn't name. Did you know music could feel like breath? She asked after, her voice soft. Only when it stops, he replied, and her eyes held his, grateful, unguarded. She began to sew curtains, to bring in wildflowers, to read French poetry from a worn book she found. Samuel listened, not understanding the words but feeling their weight, his chest warm with her voice. One evening, she left her glove off, her bare hand a quiet offering. They walked to the ridge, the sky smeared with lavender, and she spoke of the sea, of a life she'd left behind. I was running with Sifwan and making it one beach, she admitted, and he met her gaze. Aren't we all? For the first time, she smiled, small but real, and Samuel felt his heart shift, like a stone rolling free. One night, she paused at his door, hesitant. Elijah. Winterminer, she said, then corrected herself. Samuel, I used to be called Abigail. Her voice trembled, as if the name cost her something. He looked at her, his gaze steady. Used to be, she nodded, tears brimming. I don't know what I am now. He leaned forward, his voice soft but sure. We'll find out together. Months passed, and Abigail grew stronger. Her laughter rare but bright, like sunlight through clouds. But the past wasn't done with her. One day in town, a man recognized her, his voice sharp with shock. Lady Abigail Wentworth. Surshkanoan. Is it you? Her heart froze, her breath shallow as he spoke of her family. Her title, her obligations. I'm no one, she said, her voice hard, and fled, really you, her hands shaking with the weight of a life she'd buried. Back at the cabin, she told Samuel everything, her name, her lineage, her flight from a marriage she didn't want. I was currency, she said, her voice breaking. I ran to be free. Samuel listened, his face calm but his heart racing with protectiveness. You didn't lie, he said. You were surviving. She searched his eyes, tears falling. Do you forgive me? He stepped closer, his voice raw. Ain't nothing to forgive. I saw you before you said a word. A man came later, sent by her family, his polished boots and gleaming revolver, a threat wrapped in courtesy. She's a lady, he said, and she's expected back. Samuel stood firm, his voice low but unyielding. She's chosen her life. You can leave, Your Honor, or you'll find out what it means to threaten someone with nothing to lose. Abigail stepped beside him, her chin high, her fear swallowed by resolve. I'm living, she told the man, and that's more than I ever did under that name. He left, defeated by their quiet strength, and Abigail exhaled, not with relief but with release. Under the cottonwood tree, she buried a ring, her last tie to her past, her hands steady as she covered it with earth. Samuel took her hand, and they walked back, the silence between them warm. That night, she stood on the porch, staring at the stars. I used to think the sky was too big, she said. He touched her hand. And now, she smiled, her heart full. I found someone to hold it with. They married a week later, under the cottonwood. Her dress simple, his shirt clean. No vows were spoken, their lives were vow enough. As they sat on the porch, hands entwined, she asked, will the past come back? He looked at her, his eyes soft but certain. Maybe, but it'll find us living. The stars blinked open, and the prairie leaned in, vast and warm, holding them close. When